You talk about being a fairy tale. I mean, our history, it reads more like Grimm than Hans Christian Andersen, to be honest. And it's a Christian Jolly that's fortunately got us on our way on Sunday. I mean, the low point has to, for me, have been the point at the auction when we were seeing all of the club's belongings sold off. And there was that feeling then that this is it. There is no way back. But such is the resolution of the spirit of Newport supporters, that was never going to be allowed to happen. And thank goodness we're back where we are now.
So how did you get to that point of the liquidation of the club, from the point not so long before that of playing in Europe and having household names in the team? How did that happen in such a short space of time?
Poor management, I think, off the field rather than on the field. We've all probably got personal opinions, and it may be unfair to name names now in terms of where we believe that would have happened. I think some poor choices were made within the boardroom at that particular time. We had players that came in subsequently that, on paper at least, ought to have been able to have kept us into a better position than they did. But things were very poor at the club. A lot of people mistakenly blame Len Ashurst, ironically, for the signings of Alan Waddle and Jeff Johnson. But quite frankly, we sold players worth that many times over in the subsequent years. So it would be wrong to blame it. There was a lack of belief from business in the town to make it happen and support. Maybe perhaps they'd seen the bad times too many times before and didn't want to risk putting more money in again. But people were very quick to forget just how the town thrived when we were in Europe and we had an international presence. And certainly, the city suffered, or the town as it was then, suffered when the club went out of existence and we weren't on the pools each week.
Football, though, I have to remember in the late 1980s, early 90s, with 92, 93, the start of the Premier League. And those were dark years for football, weren't they? Football, up until the 1990 World Cup, was struggling for popularity. It was very much a man's game. Crowds were dwindling. And I guess Newport just missed out on that renaissance of the game.
Well, I don't think, to be honest, the Premier League has really filtered down to the sort of level that we were at in any event to that extent. I mean, the reality is we went out of existence for just over £300,000. And that's criminal when you look back upon it. I mean, what the town lost in an economic sense, a lot of people just weren't there. They went missing. And it was left to the ordinary supporter to try and rescue things. As I say, the Premier League was a phenomenon that, quite frankly, happened in a parallel universe to the one that we were living in as Newport fans in the early 90s.
Football changed, though, didn't it? Football changed a lot. I mean, families started going to football in the early 90s. Suddenly, people rediscovered it.
But for us, families were going. But we were going to places we'd never heard of before. And that was our existence. And do you know what? I wouldn't now trade it for a second. We loved every minute of going to these far-flung places. The Hellenic League, when we started there, was a real culture shock. And I can remember hearing a cockerel crowing just as we kicked off against Pegasus and thought, well, this is odd. We were in Europe just a few years ago. But there was something special, unique. Families came back without all of the commercial paraphernalia around it. It was football in its truest sense.